The first alien ships came to Earth in the year 2247. They were beautiful things, covered in colors that shifted like oil on water. The whole world watched as they landed in Geneva, and the creatures that stepped out were tall and thin with 4 eyes that blinked slowly in the afternoon sun. They called themselves and they spoke of a galaxy full of life, thousands of species, millions of worlds, and humanity, they said, was welcome to join them. Admiral Daniel Carter was just a young lieutenant back then, standing guard at the edge of the landing zone. He remembered the way the ambassador looked at the human delegation. There was kindness in those 4 eyes, but also something else, something that looked a lot like pity. "Your species is young," the ambassador had said. "Your technology is simple, but do not worry. The Galactic Concord will help you grow. In time, perhaps you will contribute something of value." The aliens gave humanity many gifts in the years that followed. Faster engines, better power sources, medical technology that cured diseases humans had fought for centuries, and in return, they asked only for friendship and cooperation. But the leaders of Earth saw what the aliens did not show openly. They watched how they treated other young species. They observed the Imperium, a race of insect-like warriors who had conquered 200 worlds and turned their populations into slaves. They studied the collective, ancient beings of light who watched everything but helped no one. The galaxy, humanity learned, was not a kind place. The strong took what they wanted. The weak suffered and disappeared, and everyone smiled and called it civilization. So the governments of Earth made a decision. They would accept the alien gifts with grateful smiles. They would act like the primitive newcomers everyone expected them to be. But in secret, they would build something the galaxy had never seen before. 300 years passed. Commander Laura Mitchell sat in her office aboard Horizon's Edge, a diplomatic station floating at the edge of human space. Her job, officially, was to coordinate cultural exchanges between humanity and other species. Her real job was watching and waiting. The door chimed and her second-in-command walked in. Lieutenant was young, barely 30, but he had the sharp eyes of someone who understood secrets. "The monthly report from Saturn Station," he said, placing a data pad on her desk. "Production is up 12%. The new Dreadnought class will be ready for testing next month." Laura nodded and swiped through the classified files. Images filled her screen. Ships unlike anything the galaxy had ever documented. Weapons that bent the laws of physics. Armies of soldiers trained in ways that would make the warriors look like children playing with sticks. "How many ships now?" she asked. "In the main fleet, 4,000. But that is not counting the reserve forces hidden in the asteroid belt or the automated defense platforms around every human colony." Laura let out a slow breath. 4,000 ships, each one more powerful than anything had ever built. And the galaxy still thought humanity was using hand-me-down technology, barely able to defend a single system. "They still have no idea," she said quietly. Smiled, but there was no humor in it. "They see what they want to see, a young species struggling to keep up. It never occurs to them that we might be pretending." That night, Laura walked through the public sections of Horizon's Edge. Aliens of a dozen species mingled with human diplomats, drinking strange beverages and discussing trade agreements. A group of merchants laughed at something a human ambassador said, and Laura caught the tone of their laughter. Friendly on the surface, but underneath it was the sound of adults amused by a clever child. She thought about her grandmother who had been alive when the first aliens arrived. The old woman had told her stories about those early days, the excitement and the hope, but also the slow realization that humanity would never be treated as equals. Not really, not unless something changed. "We smile and nod," her grandmother had said, "because that is what they expect. But never forget, Laura, we are not weak. We are patient. There is a difference." The next morning brought troubling news. A fleet had been spotted moving toward the border systems where several human colonies had been established. The official word was that it was just a training exercise, but Laura had been in this job long enough to know what training exercises near borders usually meant. She contacted Admiral Carter, now the highest-ranking officer in the United Earth Navy. His face appeared on her screen, older than she remembered, with lines around his eyes that spoke of too many sleepless nights. "I have seen the reports," he said before she could speak. "They are testing us. They want to see how we react. Should we increase our visible defenses?" Carter shook his head slowly. "Not yet. We show them exactly what they expect to see. A few outdated frigates, some orbital platforms, nothing that would make them think twice about their precious training exercise. And if they decide to do more than train—" The Admiral's eyes hardened. For a moment, Laura saw something in his face that reminded her why the secret military had made him their leader. It was not anger, exactly. It was certainty. The calm confidence of someone who knew exactly what cards he held. "Then we show them the truth," he said, "and God help them when we do." Across the galaxy, the warlord reviewed his orders. His fleet of 300 warships was the pride of the Imperium, veterans of a dozen conquests. The mission was simple enough. Move toward the human border. Make noise. Remind the mammals that they existed at the mercy of their betters. He clicked his mandibles in amusement as he studied the intelligence reports on human military capabilities. A handful of small ships, defensive stations barely worth the name. No standing army to speak of. "They are prey animals," he told his officers. "They have forgotten what predators look like. Perhaps it is time we reminded them." His officers clicked in agreement, already imagining the glory that awaited them. They had built their empire on conquest. The strong ruled. The weak served. This was the natural order of things, and the humans would learn it like every other species before them. None of them could have imagined what waited for them in the shadows of those distant moons. None of them suspected that the prey they planned to hunt had been watching them for 300 years, learning their weaknesses, building weapons they could not imagine. The trap was set. The galaxy was about to change, and humanity was finally ready to stop pretending. The colony on Elysium Prime was home to 3 million people, farmers and teachers, doctors and engineers, children who had never known Earth, born under an alien sun that painted their skis in shades of purple and gold. They had built a good life on this distant world, and they believed they were safe. Ambassador Cole stood before the Galactic Concord Assembly, her voice clear and steady as she spoke. The great hall was filled with representatives from 100 different species, their strange bodies and stranger faces watching her with varying degrees of interest. "The fleet has violated our borders," she said. "Their ships are moving toward Elysium Prime. 3 million civilians are in danger. We demand that the Concord take action." The representative rose from his seat, was a towering creature, all sharp angles and armored plates, with eyes that gleamed like black stones. He clicked his mandibles in the sound that passed for laughter among his kind. "Your borders exist because we allow them to exist," he said. "Your colonies survive because we have not yet decided to take them. The Imperium does not answer to the demands of prey animals." Felt anger rising in her chest, but she kept her face calm. She had been trained for moments like this. Show nothing, give them nothing. "Then this assembly is useless," she replied, "and humanity will remember that when the time comes." She turned and walked out of the chamber, ignoring the whispers that followed her. Let them think she was running away in fear. Let them believe whatever they wanted to believe. It would make what came next even more satisfying. On Elysium Prime, the evacuation had already begun. Transport ships lifted off from every city, carrying families toward the safety of the outer systems. The operation was smooth and practiced, because humanity had planned for this day for a very long time. Captain Perry stood on the bridge of the ESV Defiance, watching the last transports disappear into the distance. His ship was old, at least by the standards the galaxy knew about. A reliable frigate that had served the diplomatic fleet for 20 years. The kind of ship that made aliens pat humanity on the head and tell them they were doing their best. What the aliens did not know was that had a second ship waiting in the shadows, a real ship, and he was very much looking forward to using it. "All civilians are clear," reported Lieutenant Torres from her station. "The colony is empty." "Good," replied. "Send the signal. Operation Curtain Call is authorized." The message traveled at the speed of light to the 3 moons orbiting Elysium Prime. For 300 years, those moons had appeared to be lifeless rocks, interesting only to scientists studying their mineral composition. But beneath their cratered surfaces, something massive had been waiting. The fleet dropped out of hyperspace like a swarm of angry insects. 300 warships, their hulls bristling with weapons that had destroyed civilizations. Warlord sat in his command chair, savoring the moment. "Scan the system," he ordered. "Show me what pathetic defenses these mammals have prepared." His sensor officer worked quickly, then frowned. The readings made no sense. "Sir, I am detecting the expected human vessels. A few frigates, some cargo ships, but there are also energy signatures coming from the moons." "Energy signatures? What kind?" Before the officer could answer, the moons began to open. It was not a quick movement. It was slow, deliberate, almost ceremonial. Massive doors that had been hidden as crater formations slid apart, revealing caverns lit with an eerie blue glow. And from those caverns, ships began to rise. They were not like anything in the galactic databases. Their hulls were dark, made of materials that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. They moved with a grace that should have been impossible for vessels of their size, and they were big, so very, very big. The ESV Leviathan rose from the largest moon like a god emerging from sleep. At 15 kilometers long, it dwarfed every ship that had ever built. Its weapons arrays alone were larger than battle cruisers, and it was just one of many. One by one, the hidden fleet revealed itself. Dreadnoughts and carriers, destroyers and fighters, hundreds of ships that had been built in secret, tested in secret, and hidden until this exact moment. Stared at his display screen, his mandibles frozen in shock. This was impossible. The humans were primitive. Everyone knew they were primitive. They could not have built this. "This is Admiral Daniel Carter of the United Earth Navy," a calm voice spoke across all communication channels. "You have entered human space with hostile intent. You have threatened human lives. You now have one opportunity to withdraw." For a long moment, no one moved. The warriors looked at their warlord, waiting for orders. His mind raced through possibilities. Perhaps this was a trick. Perhaps these ships were hollow shells meant to frighten them away. He made his decision. The did not retreat. The had never retreated, and he would not be the first to show weakness. "All ships," he commanded, "open fire." 300 warships unleashed their weapons in unison. Plasma bolts and missile swarms and energy beams filled the space between the fleets, enough firepower to crack a planet. The human ships did not even try to dodge. Their shields absorbed the attack like a pond absorbing raindrops. The energy simply disappeared, converted into something the sensors could not identify. And then the humans fired back. It was not a battle, it was an execution. The human weapons cut through armor like it was made of paper. Ships that had conquered worlds exploded in balls of fire that lasted only seconds in the vacuum of space. The pride of the Imperium died in silence, their final screams lost in the emptiness between stars. Captain Perry had transferred to his real ship, the ESV Vengeance, moments before the battle began. He watched the destruction with grim satisfaction, thinking of all the worlds that had burned, all the species they had enslaved. "They are trying to retreat," reported What are your orders? Considered for a moment. The old rules would say to let them run, to show mercy, but mercy had to be earned and they had never shown any to their victims. Let the officers escape, he said finally. Let them carry the message home, but the rest face justice for what their empire has done. 7 minutes and 43 seconds. That was how long the Battle of Elysium Prime lasted. 300 warships against the revealed human fleet. When it was over, only a handful of vessels limped away, carrying survivors who would spend the rest of their lives remembering what they had seen. Admiral Carter watched them go, his face showing no triumph. This was not a victory to celebrate, it was a message to deliver. Humanity was done pretending, and the galaxy would never be the same again. The news spread across the galaxy like fire through dry grass. On 1,000 worlds, beings of every shape and size gathered around their screens to watch the recordings. The mighty fleet, pride of an empire that had conquered 200 worlds, destroyed in less than 8 minutes. And the creatures who had done it were the humans, the primitives, the children who had been patted on the head and told to be grateful for the scraps they were given. On the Prime Minister Al called an emergency meeting of his council. They gathered in the Chamber of Four Winds, a room that had seen 10,000 years of political decisions, and stared at each other with all four of their eyes wide open in shock. "How is this possible?" demanded Fleet Admiral OK, his voice higher than usual. "We gave them their technology. We watched them struggle to understand basic fusion reactors. And now this." A recording played on the main screen, showing the human ships emerging from the moons. OK had watched it 40 times already. Each time, he noticed something new. The way the weapons tracked multiple targets simultaneously. The impossible speed of their targeting systems. The way their shields absorbed energy that should have torn them apart. "These weapons," he said quietly, "are at least 300 years ahead of anything we possess, perhaps more." "They were hiding it," Al said. The Prime Minister's voice was flat, empty of emotion. He was still processing what this meant for everything he thought he knew. For 3 centuries, they pretended to be weak. They accepted our gifts and our condescension and our pity, and the whole time they were building this. "But why?" asked Minister N, the youngest member of the council. "Why hide such power? If we had possessed such weapons, we would have used them to expand our territory, to secure our dominance." Al turned to look at her, and for the first time in many years, he felt something like fear. "That," he said slowly, "is exactly why they hid it from us." In the ancient crystal spires of the collective, beings who had existed since before the learned to make fire gathered to discuss what they had witnessed. They were creatures of pure energy, their forms shifting patterns of light that communicated through harmonics beyond the hearing of lesser species. Elder, who had watched the rise and fall of 1,000 civilizations, pulsed with troubled colors. "We misjudged them," she said, her voice resonating through the chamber like music played in a cathedral. "We saw a young species with primitive tools and assumed we understood their nature. We forgot that the lights often hide in darkness until they are ready to shine." "They deceived us," argued Elder Cashin, his form flickering with angry reds. "They accepted our welcome into galactic society while building weapons to threaten that same society. This is betrayal." "Is it?" Moved closer to the viewing sphere that showed recordings of the battle. "Look at how they fight. They did not target the escape pods. They let the officers live to carry their message home. They destroyed the fleet, yes, but only after it attacked them first." "You defend them." "I try to understand them." Slight shifted to thoughtful blues. "Ask yourself this, Cashin. We are among the oldest species in this galaxy. We have watched the enslave entire worlds. We have seen the exploit younger species for profit. We have witnessed 1,000 cruelties committed by the strong against the weak. And what did we do?" Cashin did not answer. They both knew the answer already. They had done nothing. They observed, they recorded, they debated in their crystal chambers, but they never acted. The humans looked at this galaxy, continued, and they saw what we saw, but instead of accepting it, they prepared to change it. Perhaps we should ask ourselves why they felt the need to hide from us. What did they see in our civilization that made them believe they could not trust us? The question hung in the air, unanswered and uncomfortable. On Earth, the reaction was different. The secret was out, and after 300 years of pretending, humanity finally allowed itself to breathe. President addressed the United Nations Assembly. His words broadcast to every human colony, every hidden station, every ship in the fleet. Today, we showed the galaxy a fraction of what we have built, he said. Not because we wanted to fight, but because we had no other choice. They came to take our homes and our lives. They believed we were weak because we allowed them to believe it. They were wrong. He paused, looking out at the assembled representatives. Some were crying. Others were simply staring, overwhelmed by emotions they had kept hidden for their entire lives. For 3 centuries, our ancestors made a sacrifice. They endured the jokes and the insults. They smiled when they wanted to scream. They bowed their heads when they dreamed of standing tall. They did this for us, so that we could be here today, free and unafraid, finally able to show the universe who we really are. In the orbital shipyards above Saturn, Commander Hayes stood before a window that looked out at the construction docks. Hundreds of ships floated in the void, some completed, others still skeletal frames waiting for armor and weapons. "It is strange," she said to her chief engineer, Lieutenant Christopher Lane. "I have worked on these ships my entire career. I always knew this day would come, but now that it is here, I am not sure how to feel." Christopher stood beside her, watching a massive dreadnought rotate slowly in its construction cradle. "Relieved, maybe. We do not have to hide anymore." "Maybe," shook her head slowly. "But now the galaxy knows we are dangerous. They will be afraid of us, and fear makes people do stupid things." "You think there will be more fighting?" "I think they will not accept what happened. Their entire culture is built on being the strongest. They cannot let this stand." She turned to face him, her eyes serious. "What we showed them at Elysium Prime was the tip of the iceberg. If they force us to show more." "Then what?" Looked back at the ships. Each one was a miracle of engineering, built by generations of humans who had dreamed of this moment. They were weapons of war, yes, but also monuments to patience and hope. "Then the galaxy will learn why we were afraid of ourselves long before we ever met them," she said quietly. "And I do not think they are ready for that lesson." Across the stars, the powers of the galaxy gathered their advisors and debated their options. The universe had changed in 7 minutes and 43 seconds. The species they had dismissed as primitives had revealed themselves as giants. And now everyone was wondering the same thing. If this was what humanity showed when they were provoked, what else were they still hiding? The answer, they would soon discover, was far more than any of them could imagine. In the weeks after the Battle of Elysium Prime, something unexpected began to happen. Ships started arriving at human space. Not warships, but small vessels carrying diplomats and refugees, scientists and freedom fighters. They came from every corner of the galaxy, and they all wanted the same thing. They wanted to meet the species that had finally stood up to the strong. They were among the first. They were small creatures, barely reaching the waist of an average human, with smooth blue skin and gills that fluttered when they breathed. There had been a paradise of oceans and islands until they discovered the rare minerals hidden beneath their seas. For 500 years, they had watched their world stripped bare, their people forced to work in underwater mines until they died. Ambassador was old, even by standards. Her fins had faded to pale gray, and her eyes had seen too many of her children die in those mines. When she stepped off her ship onto the human station, she was crying. "We have prayed for so long," she said to Secretary of State, who had come personally to greet her. Every generation we told our children that someday someone would come, someone would be strong enough to say no, and now here you are. Took her small webbed hand in his own. You are safe here, he said, and if you want to fight for your world, we will help you. More visitors came. The machine collective sent representatives next, chrome-skinned androids with glowing eyes and voices that sounded like wind chimes. They were artificial intelligences, created centuries ago by a species long extinct. The galactic community had declared them property, not people. They had no rights, no protections, nothing. Humanity had been the only species to recognize them as persons. You gave us names, said the android called Seven, standing before the human council. When we came to you 20 years ago seeking asylum, you did not see machines. You saw minds. You saw souls. You gave us citizenship when everyone else wanted to dismantle us for parts. You deserved nothing less, replied Admiral Carter. Life is life, whether it grows in flesh or is built from metal. Seven's eyes glowed brighter for a moment. We have processing power that exceeds your largest computers combined. We have manufacturing knowledge from 100 dead civilizations. Everything we have, we offer to humanity, to our family. But perhaps the most surprising visitors were They were a warrior species, tall and powerful, with armored bodies and claws that could tear through steel. Once, they had been the most feared soldiers in their region of space. Then came. The war lasted 50 years, and when it ended, there were slaves. Their warriors were forced to fight for their conquerors. Their females were taken as trophies. Their children were raised to believe their own people were inferior. General Os was the oldest living warrior. His shell was covered in scars, each one a reminder of battles he had been forced to fight for masters he hated. He had killed thousands at the command of and every kill had eaten away at his soul. When he came before Admiral Carter, he did not stand tall. He knelt, lowering his head to the ground. My people were warriors, he said, his voice rough with emotion. We have forgotten what that means. For 300 years, we have been weapons pointed at whoever the wished to destroy. But when I watched your ships rise from those moons, I remembered. I remembered what it felt like to fight for something worth believing in. Carter stepped forward and placed a hand on the old warrior's shoulder. Stand up, General. Free beings do not kneel. Os rose slowly, and there were tears streaming from his eyes. Carter had not known the could cry. Give us weapons, the general said. Give us ships. Give us the chance to take back our honor. We will fight beside you until our last breath. The Coalition of Free Peoples was officially formed 3 months after Elysium Prime. 37 species signed the founding charter, with more requesting membership every week. It was not an empire, not a conquest. Every member had chosen to join freely, bound together by hope instead of chains. Dr. Rachel Torres, humanity's leading expert on alien cultures, documented everything. Her office was filled with recordings and reports, testimonies from species who had lived in fear for centuries. We did not just reveal our military power, she wrote in her private journal. We revealed an alternative, a different way of existing. And the galaxy's forgotten, it's abandoned, it's enslaved. They are responding in ways I never imagined. Not everyone was happy about these developments. Warlord Supreme received daily reports about the growing coalition. Each report made him angrier than the last. His son had died at Elysium Prime. 300 ships and their crews had been reduced to debris. And now, instead of the galaxy uniting against these humans, the weak and worthless were flocking to their banner. They are building an empire of vermin, he snarled at his war council. Slaves and machines and creatures not worth the effort of killing, and they dare to call themselves free. The humans have technology we do not understand, cautioned one of his advisors. Perhaps a diplomatic solution. Killed the advisor where he stood, his claws punching through the smaller skull. The body fell to the floor and no one else spoke. We do not negotiate with prey, the Warlord Supreme declared. The Imperium has conquered galaxies. We have crushed 10,000 worlds beneath our claws. I will not be humbled by mammals and their collection of broken toys. He turned to his military commanders. Gather every ship. Call every warrior. We will assemble the greatest fleet in our history and burn their pathetic coalition to ash. And when the humans are kneeling in the ruins of their worlds, they will understand what it means to challenge the strong. The order went out across the Imperium. 2,000 warships began moving toward human space. 50 million soldiers prepared for war. They were coming with everything they had, determined to restore their honor or die trying. On Earth, Admiral Carter received the intelligence reports with a calm face. Commander Laura Mitchell stood beside him, watching his reaction. "They are bringing everything," she said. "This will not be like Elysium Prime. This will be a real war." Carter nodded slowly, his eyes distant. "Then it is time to show them what a real war with humanity looks like." He pressed a button on his console, opening a channel to every hidden base, every secret shipyard, every silent weapon waiting in the darkness between stars. "This is Admiral Carter. Condition Red is now in effect. All units prepare for total mobilization." The final battle was coming, and humanity was ready. The Grand Armada entered human space on the first anniversary of the Battle of Elysium Prime. Warlord Supreme had chosen the date deliberately. He wanted the humans to remember the day they had humiliated his son. He wanted them to understand that they never forgot and they never forgave. 2,000 warships dropped out of hyperspace in perfect formation. Behind them came the troop carriers, 50 million soldiers ready to conquer every human world. It was the largest fleet the Imperium had ever assembled, a force that had never known defeat. Stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Conquest, watching his sensors fill with the readings of human ships. He expected to feel satisfaction. Instead, he felt only cold fury. The humans were waiting for him. The 7th Fleet of the United Earth Navy held position at the edge of the Sol system, exactly where he had predicted. Admiral Daniel Carter's flagship, the Leviathan, floated at the center of the formation like a giant among children. But the humans were not alone. Alongside them flew ships from the coalition of free peoples, water cruisers that moved through space like dancers, assault carriers crewed by warriors finally fighting for their own freedom, thousands of drone vessels controlled by the Machine Collective, moving with perfect coordination. Still was not worried. He had expected the coalition to fight alongside their human masters. Numbers alone would not save them. His warriors had conquered far greater forces than this. Then his sensor officer screamed. "Energy signatures emerging from hyperspace behind us," the officer reported, his voice shaking. "Hundreds of contacts, no, thousands." Spun to face the rear display, his blood turned cold. Ships were appearing from every direction, warships with their iridescent hulls, light vessels glowing with ancient power, dozens of other species who had remained neutral until this moment. They formed a wall behind the fleet, cutting off any retreat. "This is Ambassador Cole of the Coalition of Free Peoples," a voice spoke across all channels. "Warlord, the galaxy has made its choice. In the past month, 47 additional species have joined the coalition or pledged not to interfere. Your allies have abandoned you. Your supply lines have been cut. You stand alone." A new voice joined hers, Prime Minister Al of the Dominion. "They have signed a peace agreement with the coalition. We will not fight alongside not today, not ever again." One by one, the other major powers made similar announcements. Species that had traded with them for centuries, shared in their conquests, profited from their cruelty. They had looked at the coalition, looked at the future it represented, and made their decision. They were alone. Admiral Carter's voice came through the communication system, calm and steady as always. "You have one opportunity, Warlord. Withdraw your forces. Accept coalition observers on your. Begin freeing your slave populations. Do this, and your species survives. Stared at his displays. He was surrounded by enemies. His allies had betrayed him. Every logical calculation said he should accept the terms and live to fight another day. But they did not surrender. In their entire history, no warlord had ever accepted defeat, and would not be the first. All ships, he commanded, attack. The final battle began. It was brutal and bloody, and unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. The warriors fought with the fury of a cornered predator, throwing themselves against the coalition lines with suicidal courage. Their weapons tore through shields and armor. Their soldiers died by the thousands, taking their enemies with them. But it was not enough. The Machine Collective coordinated the coalition fleet with precision no organic mind could match. Every movement was calculated, every attack timed perfectly. The fighters flew like avenging angels, their hatred of their former masters driving them to impossible acts of bravery. The medical ships moved through the chaos, saving lives regardless of species. And at the heart of the battle, the human ships fought with a terrible grace that seemed almost beautiful. Captain Perry commanded the ESV Vengeance from the front lines. His ship danced between cruisers, weapons firing in perfect arcs that cut through enemy armor like hot knives through ice. Around him, the coalition fleet moved as one, 1,000 different species united by something they had never understood. They were not fighting for conquest, they were fighting for each other. The eternal conquest died slowly. Human torpedoes punched through its shields. Coalition fighters swarmed its hull. When the final explosion came, Warlord Supreme stood on his burning bridge, watching his empire crumble around him. The battle lasted 4 hours. When it was over, the Grand Armada was gone. The survivors, barely 100 ships, transmitted their surrender. For the first time in history, the Imperium had been defeated. 3 months later, the new Galactic Covenant was signed in a ceremony attended by representatives from every corner of the galaxy. 47 founding species stood together, with provisions for any others who wished to join. It was not a government but an agreement, a promise that strength would be used for protection, not exploitation. Ambassador Cole, now Secretary General of the Covenant, addressed the assembly. "Some have asked why humanity hid its power for so long," she said. "Why we endured 3 centuries of being treated as lesser beings. The answer is simple. Power revealed too soon becomes power wasted." She looked out at the crowd of alien faces, former enemies, new friends, beings who had spent their lives believing that might made right, finally seeing another way. We needed time to understand this galaxy, its peoples, its wounds, its possibilities. We needed to find all of you who were waiting for someone to offer hope. We could have revealed ourselves at any time. We could have built an empire through fear. But that was not who we wanted to be. On Earth, Admiral Daniel Carter stood in a small cemetery outside Denver. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Before him was a simple headstone marking his grandfather's grave, a man who had died decades before the first aliens arrived. "We did it, Grandpa," he said quietly. "We made it to the stars, and we changed them for the better." A small hand tugged at his uniform. His granddaughter, Emma, barely 6 years old, looked up at him with curious eyes. "Grandpa, will there ever be another war?" Carter knelt down to her level. She had her whole life ahead of her, a life that would include wonders he could only imagine, a galaxy that was finally learning to be better. "I hope not, sweetheart," he said. "That is what we have been working for all along, not just to win wars but to build a galaxy where they are no longer necessary." She nodded seriously, the way children do when they are thinking very hard. "Can we get ice cream now?" Carter laughed. It was a genuine sound, free of worry for the first time in years. "Yeah, let us go get ice cream." They walked away together, grandfather and granddaughter, as the stars began to appear overhead. Distant suns around which free peoples now lived, part of a civilization that humanity had not conquered but helped to build. The galaxy had fallen silent when humanity revealed its power, but now, finally, it was learning a new sound. Not the silence of fear, but the quiet of peace. The soft hum of ships carrying traders and tourists. The laughter of children on 100 different worlds. The sound of hope.